1. I had worked at a telecommunications store for a few years, and as someone who has worked in all sorts of retail, I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that telco has the worst customers. But every now and then you get back at the worst by giving them exactly what they want. We had a local small business owner and had several services with us. Mobile phones, broadbands, landlines, the works. He thought that since he had a lot of services, that it meant that he could do what he wanted and the rules did not apply to him. This included getting behind on his bills, complaining about late fees, and absolutely losing it if any services were suspended or restricted. Bear in mind that this only happens after 3 months of overdue bills. If any of these were to happen, he would stomp in, yell, and carry on. Now, in a lot of telco stores, we are just that, stores. We can only do very little when it comes to accounts, especially business accounts. I know it's ridiculous, and if we had the capabilities to do even a few account things in store, it would have made so many people's lives easier. So we would process a payment and then call up the accounts department to reinstate the services or unrestrict them. One week in particular, he came in all smiles and shaking hands. He didn't even mind waiting in line for the people before him to be served. Normally, he would storm up to any consultant even if they were with customers already being served. I had the luck of being the first one free to serve him. He goes on a long speech about how he's expanding his business and needs several new phones for new staff he is hiring. I congratulate him and go about the process of getting them activated. We hit a problem early on, surprise, surprise. He has overdue bills and the system cannot apply new services to an account that is overdue. This does not mean a bill has been issued, it means it is past its due date. He is livid, saying he needs those services. I get on the phone with the accounts team and they are willing to waive the default wait time of 3 business days after an account is settled before applying new services. He wasn't having a bar of it and says he wants the services and will not be paying a cent today. I inform him that it simply cannot be done, literally impossible in our system to do it. He starts yelling, saying that he wants to cancel his services and take them elsewhere. I tell him that is not something we can do in store and he will need to contact the business accounts department, and they can assist him in moving his services elsewhere. He stomps off, and I thought this would be the end of it. Oh, how wrong I was. The very next day, as soon as the store opens, he is there waiting, red-faced and on the warpath. Being the most senior person during the shift, I dealt with him. He tells me about being on the phone for ages, being told they advise him not to cancel but to go to another telco and port his services. I'm guessing they didn't explain it too well, as porting means to transfer your services to another provider, keeping the same numbers and having minimal if any interruption of service. I explained to him very plainly that porting meant that all he needed to do was go to another carrier, sign up his services, give them the numbers he wants brought across, and once they do, we would automatically cancel his services on our end once the other provider takes ownership. Simple, right? Wrong. He refused to leave the store until his services were canceled. Time for my malicious compliance. While it wasn't something we could do in store, we had manual paperwork for lots of things in case of systems going down, compatibility issues, etc. So I go through our internal server to find manual paperwork for account and service cancellations and print it off, filling everything out on it ready to go. I request 2 forms of ID which I need to photocopy, that needs to be attached to the paperwork and get him to sign, informing him in no uncertain terms that if he goes ahead with this, his services will be deactivated within 2 business days and will no longer function. He was fine with this, saying that once that happened, he would go elsewhere. He signed and I went about contacting accounts, faxing the paperwork through, and they processed it all and forwarded me the confirmation for our in-store records. 2 days later, I once again open the store and he is there waiting, red-faced, and the second he sees me, he starts screaming at me that none of his services are working and his company cannot get anything done, no phones, no internet, etc., and that he is going to sue us for lost income and everything else. I go out the back and pull out the paperwork, go over it with him, going over what I told him the other day. He no longer has any services with us, they are now cancelled, and he will be unable to sign up to any new services or potentially reactivate any services until his overdue account is paid. I take him to a computer and try to access his account, showing him it no longer exists on our end, and there is literally nothing I can do. He gets up angry but defeated, and leaves yelling we have now lost a big customer. Hadn't we already? 2. So here's the context. Some years ago, I worked on a cruise ship doing souvenir photography. It was my second summer there, and we had a new manager that year that was finishing her master's in photography, standard, not digital. Pay was based on a group split commission, so if the day photographers did terrible but the night photographers did amazing, the day photographers benefited and vice versa. My first year, the owners stopped by to train us and give us specific instructions on how we would photograph guests and why we should be doing it, and saw an increase in sales as a result of it. The owner has been doing it for years and ran multiple locations, so I just listened and did what I was told. Fast forward a year or two, we have this new manager who had not been trained yet, but only received basic instructions and was told to defer to the returning employees for things she didn't understand. For the first couple of weeks it was fine, slow to start the season, so sales of course weren't crazy. Come week 5, when night cruise started, I noticed that myself and my only male coworker are both being scheduled for mornings. At first I thought, whatever, free at night, no big deal. I figured since the new manager was working with a returning employee, things would be okay for commission on the night cruise days. First week of night cruises goes by, and I noticed that I made drastically less than last year for the amount of hours I worked. I checked the sales spreadsheet, every employee needed to update this at the end of their shifts, and noticed that day sales were the same as night sales. I ran up to the ticket office to check the passenger list for the days they ran night cruises, assuming there just weren't many passengers. Not only were there more passengers at night than during the day, but I noticed way more waste. Second week, I have a split shift that overlaps with the manager. She pulls me to the side at the beginning of the shift and explains her expectations for photos. She shows me an example of hers and then shows me one I took. She told me the way I took photos was unacceptable, and I had to shoot them the way she did. These photos, by the way, get put into 8x6 sheets and small wallet-sized photos. Her photo was highly technical, let's say. The entire top half of the photo was negative space and showing off the location. Yeah, sure, I kind of got what she was saying, because I was in school for photography too. Too bad we're selling pictures of people and not space. I explained to her that myself and my coworkers have been shooting the way the owner himself instructed us to, and she said, "I'm the manager here, not you. I don't know what he told you to do, and that's not what we're doing. Do it the way I tell you, okay?" The third week, I explained to my coworker that this is what the manager wanted, and he was confused as well. So we do it. We take these photos where the passengers are barely visible in the wallet photos, and half of the photos are negative space. Sales plummeted, to no surprise from anyone but the manager and owner. I get a phone call from the owner asking if there were fewer passengers or something, and told him that it was normal. He asked why sales were done at night as well, to which I told him I had no idea because I was never scheduled to work at night anymore. I wasn't sure how to take that, but we left it at that. The next week, the owner called me to inform me that the new manager had agreed to mutually terminate her employment there, and then asked why we were having so much trouble. I told him everything she told us to do and that scheduling was bad since it left us understaffed for night cruises. It turns out she was instructed to hire new employees for the season, and she ignored every single applicant because they had no formal photography education. So basically, knowing full well it would hurt sales, to not tell the owner that the manager just wasn't good at sales photography, I just waited until she got in trouble for turning up losses because she pulled, "You do what I say, I don't care." Sorry, Jay. 3. I used to work for the Dirty Bird, KFC for anyone who doesn't do Aussie slang. And after maybe 2 years of hounding my immediate management team that you can't operate a kitchen, especially one that works with raw chicken, with just the one person and still expect everything to be done in a timely, food-safe manner, they finally decided to listen to me and allowed me to start training some of the staff that were available to work school hours out there. I was told to make sure I taught them properly, that they would be able to pass a Restaurant Operations Compliance Check, ROCC, which wasn't the problem. I knew I could do that. I had been working the kitchen for about 10 years. I know I said I'd been hounding them at least 2 years, but we had gone through the restaurant being purchased by another company, and they changed quite a few things and started trying to enforce insane requirements related to sales being made versus staff on shift. We went from 3 front, 3 drive-through lane, 1 burger, 2 cooks, and a person floating whatever needed on our busiest nights to 1, 2, 1, 1, and 0, respectively. The malicious compliance comes in around here. The day I was supposed to train the first person, Tina, I was only given for half an hour either side of lunch rush and lunch rush itself. The first half hour goes fine. I get them acquainted to the kitchen, how things should run, and what's expected of them over lunch. As we start getting into lunch rush, every few minutes my manager is on, yelling out that they need Tina to help out with the drive-thru. Tina tried to argue this, as did I. They had the normal staff they'd have any other day. Plus, it was one of the quieter days, so really, they should have been fine. Eventually, the manager comes out of the kitchen, tells me they're taking Tina and putting her on burgers. I've had it by now, and I just say, all right, fine. You better make yourself available to come out here and help because I'm not breaking your instructions about training them. Normally, I could prepare a full run of chook in under 10 minutes. Fastest in the store. Had even gone to a silly little event referred to as KFC Games, where they just see who can do the job the best, followed by the fastest, and I absolutely smashed it. But not today. I was gonna painstakingly examine every piece of chicken, make sure there wasn't anything left on them at all, bruised piece in the bin. A knob on the thigh full of feathers. Normally I'd tear the knob off and save myself a few minutes. Not today. I'm supposed to pluck every last feather off that knob. Eventually, my manager comes out of the office because the person serving front counter has started whining at them because I had the cookers going off and wasn't doing anything about them. They ask what's going on, and I told them, sorry, I'm red cook today. Company policies are red cook doesn't lift product up for any reason. Besides, as you can see, I'm still preparing the last run you gave me, and I can't leave raw chicken unattended. You could practically see the steam coming off of them, but I didn't care. I could hear the hangry customers yelling at my manager because their food was taking so long. I had a point to prove, and I was sticking to my guns. The manager finally gives up, comes out of the kitchen defeated, and starts dealing with the cooked product instead of sitting in the office on their phone. I never did get it through to them that if they wanted a kitchen to run in a food-safe manner, with the speed of a fast food restaurant, they needed more people on. But that wasn't my problem. A few months later, I'd quit the place anyways, and they struggled to get anyone that was willing to pull 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. shifts, because all the school kids would never show up on time. But that's a different story. 4. This isn't my story, but I was just part of it. I used to work at a pulp mill. I got the whole story a few days later from the person enacting the revenge. Let me preface this by explaining some terminology to those who aren't familiar with pulp mills. There's a log pond and chipper area. That's where the logs are soaked in warm water, debarked, and then chipped into small chunks before being sent to the pulp mill to be boiled into pulp for paper. The person controlling the log pond area is the operator, and he sits in a 7 by 8 foot booth called the chipper booth. This booth contains a nice comfy recliner-style chair with multiple computer monitors containing HMI, human-machine interface, that allows you to control the equipment, as well as see the equipment through cameras and a mini-fridge for operators to keep their lunches in. These run 24/7 with people taking shifts as chipper booth operators. One of the operators, Al, was a big guy, 500 pounds big. All he ate every day for lunch was a Hungry Man microwave dinner and a whole can of tuna. But because he was too lazy to step outside and throw away the tuna can in the bin, He brought a smaller lidless garbage bin in the chipper booth to throw his lunch into. Of course, this meant that the whole chipper booth smelled like Hungry Man dinners and tuna the whole shift. His cross-shift operator, Ty, would have to air out the booth for hours every night and take out the garbage bin with tuna because it didn't belong in there. After a few days of this, Ty finally asked Al to throw his tuna can in the outside bin or at least open up the chipper booth doors a few hours before shift change to air it out. Apparently Al just said, "Sure thing, buddy." See, the thing with mill workers is that if you tell them you don't like something, they will bug you by doing that exact thing because they think it's a joke. Al not only kept the door closed, but he would fart non-stop in the chipper booth too. I've had the unfortunate luck of walking in there after a fresh fart one time and almost lost my lunch. Ty was not too happy about this. One day I was walking past the log pond area and Al came bursting out coughing and dry heaving. A strong smell then started coming out of the booth and I knew exactly why. It wasn't farts or tuna or Hungry Man dinners. That was the smell of durian and shrimp paste. Ty was Southeast Asian and loved the taste of durian and green mangoes with shrimp paste. I also love eating durian, and I sometimes cook with shrimp paste. I'm Asian too, and that's how I recognize the smells. For those who don't know what durian smells like, it depends on your taste buds. For those who like it, it tastes like a sweet custard, but is very polarizing. For those who don't like it, imagine onions mixed with propane and a dirty sock that's been worn for 2 weeks straight. It's so bad that even in Asian countries, they are banned in public and government buildings. Fermented shrimp paste tastes like it sounds. Shrimp died, rotted, and they were blended up. It's very salty and fishy. Good in stir-frying, in very small amounts. Ty had eaten a whole durian in the booth, and he left the peel and seeds in Al's bin. Al walked in, took one whiff, and ran back outside, and that's when I walked by. Al apparently tried to report the incident to HR, but was shot down because it didn't cause safety concerns like allergies, and Ty threatened to report them for being culturally intolerant. After all, who gets to decide what foods are good enough smelling to allow in the mill? Al got the message, though, and never left a can of tuna in the booth again. Ty and I had a good laugh and found out that Philippines and Vietnam have a lot of ingredients in common. Side note, a few months later, Al got curious and asked us what durian tastes like. We brought some in and let him try a bite in the parking lot, hundreds of feet from the nearest person. Turns out he likes it, but just can't get past the smell. 5. I had this roommate in college, Jessica. And while living in the dorms, we were best friends. We spent most of our evenings together, and overall, we had no problems. Just besties, you know? Well, fast forward 2 years, we weren't in the dorms anymore, and I was about to move in with my childhood best friend, her boyfriend, and we needed another roommate. I thought, great, I'll ask Jessica. So, we are all living together, and at first it was great. She and I were still friends, hung out a lot, no problems. And then small things started happening. She started using my makeup without asking. She'd invite me to a party, I'd get ready and sit out and wait for her, and she'd forget and fall asleep without telling me. She'd take my dab oil, etc. Then things got worse. She allowed her boyfriend to move in without asking us. She also basically stopped paying rent, almost getting us evicted 4 times, all while bragging and showing off her expensive nails. And spending money on alcohol and party drugs. She'd come home at like 4 in the morning and loudly do the dishes while we were asleep. I had 9 a.m. classes. She would constantly set off our fire alarms by blowing vape clouds right at the detectors, again in the middle of the night. Jessica was also a compulsive liar, especially to her mother and family who sent her money, which we almost never saw a penny of. We stopped hanging out, obviously, and I had begun to despise her. While her boyfriend, who I initially hated, thinking he was freeloading and very annoying, ended up wanting to hang out with myself and my other roommates when we would have game nights. They weren't his biggest fans still, but we had a lot in common, so I warmed up. He'd stay up and watch me play video games or watch shows while drinking. Nothing weird, we just became friends. Jessica hated that. She would come out at like 8 p.m. and demand he came to bed with her, which he normally wouldn't. And when he did, they would get into massive fights where she would accuse him of cheating with me. Ironically, she ended up cheating on him. I was there to comfort him and help him through the breakup. So we ended up hanging out more, which eventually became hooking up. And while, yes, we were both attracted to each other at that point, we mostly started having sex to piss her off, and boy did it work, she was furious. We had to block her in just about everything because she'd message him constantly and harass him about it. However, we caught feelings. Started dating, got engaged, and now we're happily married. Needless to say, Jessica wasn't happy for us, but I don't care because I couldn't be happier. I love him more than anything. What started as revenge sex turned into a wonderful relationship. The people I moved in with, just to clear up some confusion, initially were my childhood best friend and her boyfriend. Jessica's boyfriend, my now husband, moved in with us a little bit later. In regard to him freeloading, we didn't like him at first, so he didn't talk to us initially, which meant we didn't know that he was actually the one paying Jessica's share of the rent when it got bad. And she'd only tell him about how bad it was when the rental agency called her repeatedly about it. I didn't learn that he was paying until nearly 2 months after they'd broken up. As for moving on too soon, we hooked up, sure. But we didn't start officially dating for around 5 or 6 months, as we figured that was probably rebounding, and didn't have a basis for a healthy relationship initially. After that, we dated for a year, and were engaged for 3 years before we got married. We did not invite her to the wedding, but we did find out that she had planned to crash it anyway. We had a very small and private wedding due to COVID restrictions. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 165. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button and share the video with a friend or family member. Okay, let's see. No special shout-outs, although I think I got a couple more. I'll have to check for later in the month. So let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And I'm stealing this one, borrowing, gifted. Let's say it was gifted by one of my moderators, Shigar. And that is, if you could swap 2 smells, any 2 smells, what would it be? I said I'd probably want to swap the smell of garbage for cherry blossoms because I don't have cherry blossoms in my garden, but the only place I can really keep the trash cans is just outside my front door. So sometimes, if it's a warm day, you might get a whiff as you walk by, or if you're dumping trash. So it might be nice if it smelled of something nicer. Might take the trash out a bit more often. But you may have different smells you'd like to swap for different reasons. So let me know what you think in a comment below. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.